happy to have Joan, who is my focusing partner. And Joan and I go way back to when we were both working with Jean. We've been focusing partners and collaborators for many years now. And I was just thinking that Joan and I wrote an article for the Networker about focusing partnerships for helpers, and we'll send you the link for that. Be a very nice article for this group. Oh, let's see what to say about Joan. I've learned so much from Joan, and she certainly doesn't need an introduction. A beloved focusing and focusing-oriented therapist teacher for so many years in so many places. And her article, River of Knowing, I assigned to all of my focusing-oriented therapy students. It's a wonderful article. And we've done many workshops together and just had a wonderful time. Joan is somebody who really knows how to have fun and joy and really enjoys her work as well as her play. You know how you think of certain words as belonging to certain people? And the word that I associate with Joan, her word is savor. And she talks about savoring life. And every time I say the word savor, I think of Joan. I said, that's a Joan word. And that's something that I really learned from Joan about savoring life in all its complexities and its lights and shadows. I'm so looking forward to being with all of you and hearing Joan sort of talking about the light and the darkness this morning. And so welcome Joan, and welcome everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, for that incredible introduction. I'm so happy to be here this morning with all of you. I want to say that Melinda and Isabel and Lynn have created this incredible sanctuary for Monday mornings that's quite a robust community, and I welcome new people who are here today. This community actually reminded me of an African saying that I love, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I have a sense that this community will continue to go together. I want to talk to you today about an approach that feels very important to me, particularly in this very difficult time of the coronavirus pandemic, namely acknowledging the darkness and embracing the light. Or to put it in a more psychological framework, integrating focusing with positive psychology to support the full range of our potential. The Buddha reportedly said that every life is filled with 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. And we know that everyone's life has a measure of suffering in it, right? That's always true. But due to this long pandemic, due to, in some countries, questionable leadership about how to contain the pandemic, due to our heightened awareness of structural racism, and due to the economic collapse and catastrophe, it feels like darkness has expanded and is threatening to take over the light. And most of us are dealing with a new surge of fear and anxiety, frustration, loss, anger, and sadness. So how do we manage under this storm cloud of darkness? You know, what can we do to counterbalance the negative and access a more positive mindset? And I know many of you have tried many different activities during this time and practices, taking walks in nature and perhaps doing yoga or starting a meditation practice, having more focusing sessions, or doing creative work, you know, gardening or making art like Lynn does, or dancing or Tai Chi, or any kind of creative activities, making music, and also, of course, still trying to keep in touch at a distance or online with people who are important to us. And all of those activities and practices are enormously helpful. And like many of you, one of my favorite practices to try and keep myself going is focusing. And by the way, we need these practices and activities more than ever because we're denied our usual ways of managing and reducing our stress, right? We no longer have access to many of our strategies that worked before, whether it's, work environments or social lives or just having personal contact with friends and family. So focusing is, I rely on it more than I ever have, and maybe that's true for you too. And a couple of Mondays ago in this wonderful forum, Steve Moskowitz described focusing as a practice of bettering, of getting better. And I wholeheartedly agree with him. I thought that was a brilliant way of putting it. And when I have a session with my focusing partner, who you now know who it is, and I work with my fears or frustrations, the first thing I notice is that I'm different the moment I'm with her than when I'm alone, right? Her focusing attitude, her compassionate acceptance of whatever I am going to bring changes my very context. So that's the first thing. We're not alone when we're focusing with a partner. And Jen Lin called that relational thickness, right? And then by the end of the session, after pausing and turning toward the parts of me that feel sad or worried, and getting a felt sense and finding the right handle and responding to the powerful focusing prompts that Charlotte reviewed with us a couple of weeks ago, I almost always find a kind of calm and spaciousness and a greater perspective than I could have possibly foreseen only 20 or 30 minutes earlier. No matter how many years I focus, I'm still surprised. What a transformative practice it is, right? And I see that from my clients, and perhaps you recognize that yourself. So there's no doubt that focusing on our distress and gaining a sense of agency that we get from focusing and having a life forward direction is not only helpful, but life-giving. And yet, I believe that focusing only on our troubles is not enough. And particularly during this time of the pandemic, when there's so much added anxiety around us and so many more fears, and so much tilting in the direction of the negative, I think it is really helpful to also focus on the positive aspects of our lives, our joys, our things we're grateful for, the pleasures that we have, savoring practices, gratitude practices, because they all nourish and amplify our well-being. So I think we continue to focus, but we also focus on the positive aspects of our lives and integrate that with some other practices. So to give you a concrete example, when my husband and I take a hike or visit friends outdoors, as we did yesterday, we usually sit in the car for a moment afterwards and say, what was the best of that? What captures the best of that for us, right? And just in doing that, we notice we remember those experiences more vividly. They go into long-term memory, right? And then the other advantage is we're also always surprised by what the other person said. You like going down the mountain better than that gorgeous view? That was your favorite part, right? So we learn more about each other. But I'm not claiming that it's easy to bring the positive into our lives. You can, as you know from your own experience, you can have a wonderful focusing session or a great conversation with a friend, or you can go on a beautiful walk, and yet 2 hours later, some aspect of your life or of the external world can pull you right down, right? the truth is, it's extremely hard to sustain positive states, right? And it's almost, it is as if the positive is like Teflon for our psyches. It slips away, where the negative is like Velcro. It sticks to us, right? Haven't you had that experience? The problem is that we humans are hardwired to be drawn to the negative. We're magnetized by bad news. We remember unpleasant experiences while at the same time minimizing or forgetting or ignoring the pleasant experiences we have. And this tendency to vigilantly scan our environments for threat and for danger has a name. It's been called the negativity bias. Just raise your hand if that's a familiar term to some of you. Okay, it is. So the negativity bias, for those of you who don't know, is the basic emotional architecture of our brains that we have inherited. And it was very useful back eons and eons ago on the savannah when we had a saber-toothed tiger chasing us. But in 2020, and particularly in this time of the pandemic, it can actually be a design flaw of our brains to be so overly focused, if you will, on the negative. So that's the bad news. However, the good news is that just being aware of our proclivity towards always noticing the negative and overvaluing the negative gives us the possibility of changing our brains. In other words, we can be intentional about seeing and appreciating all the positive in our lives. And I want to remind you that it takes intention to notice the positive, just the way, and to savor the positive, and to really kind of immerse yourself when you can in what's positive, right? And, you know, it takes intention to do a lot of things that are good for us. It takes intention to set up a focusing exchange or to focus by yourself. It takes intention to decide to meditate. It takes intention to exercise or to eat more healthfully, right? But we sort of know that those are a choice we make. Whereas for happiness and well-being, many of us feel like, well, happiness either just falls into our life or it doesn't, right? But actually there are the whole field of positive psychology that has given us known tools that help us to access and to nourish and increase our well-being. So my question today is, what would it be like if we could bring the same reverent attitude that we bring to focusing on our troubles, to focusing on the positive aspects of our lives? You know, our joys, our appreciation, the love we give and receive, the gifts that come unbidden from nature, right? Just the trees, the birds, the beauty, our pets, right? Conscious attention to the positive is in no way meant to deny how hard our lives are, particularly now, but it's to create a better balance between the dark and the light. The current that pulls us toward the negative is quite strong. And research in positive psychology has shown us that it takes 3 positive experiences for every negative experience to sustain a feeling of well-being. Just think about that for a moment, right? And why is that? It's because of the negativity bias, right? The negative weighs more, so it takes 3 positives to equal the negative, right? And interestingly, in studies of long-term healthy relationships, 2 different researchers have come up with the same ratio, which is that it takes 5 positives for every negative to keep a relationship robust and healthy, whether in your family relationship or partner relationship. Do you realize what that means? For every comment that you make to just say your partner or your child that's critical or nagging or negative in some way or deprecating, you need to have 5 that are generous and loving and supportive to balance that, right? It is a challenge. But helps me sometimes when I'm about to criticize my husband or nag him for the third time that day. I ask myself, how's my ratio doing? And occasionally that actually stops me. So there are so many benefits of cultivating a positive mindset. I want to just note a few of them. One is, of course, it helps our mood. The second is, as I've mentioned just now, it helps our relationships, right? Good moods are contagious, and so are bad moods. So when we're, feeling more positive and seeing the positive, it affects all those around us. But we know as focusers that the mind and the body are very much connected to each other. So you won't be surprised that research in positive psychology has shown that having a more positive mindset, looking for the positive, actually strengthens our immune system. It creates better cardiovascular health, and it also allows us to live longer. On average, people who are more positive have a longer lifespan. There's also good data now that people with greater sense of well-being and happiness are more energized, are more generous, are more altruistic, are more likely to be in the world, to become an active agent for positive change, right? When we're depressed and down, we're much more pulled into ourselves. We tend to isolate, to withdraw. And when we're happier, we tend to be able to move out to be more connected to others. Sometimes we can switch pretty easily from a negative state to a positive state. When my husband, who's here today, leaves food out on the refrigerator, from the refrigerator on the counter, as he sometimes does, I am perfectly capable of working myself up into a self-righteous annoyance with him. But I'm also capable of saying, just remembering all the loving and kind and considerate things he's done that day for me, right? And then, of course, I instantly have a greater perspective. I'm less reactive. I'm more understanding. So sometimes we really can make that choice to just go with the positive. Another example is that I'm not a morning person, and I often wake up feeling a sense of dread. But I found that if I ask myself, what might today be an opportunity for? All of a sudden my mood lifts. I feel some positive curiosity, almost excitement for what the day will unfold, right? However, if we're feeling an extreme state of negativity, we're very reactive, we're angry at somebody, we're really down in the dumps, we're very sad, of course we can't and shouldn't simply try and turn the dial, right, to joy or gratefulness, right? That wouldn't be possible. We have to go very slowly, step by step. We need to find ways to calm down the amygdala, that part of our brain that gets overreactive that gets activated by intense emotions and can create a fight or flight response. So we need to calm that down first. And focusing is my favorite way to do that. I thought I would tell you about an experience that I had a couple of days ago when I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you from positive psychology. And ironically, I noticed that I was in a pretty low mood. I was feeling pretty depressed, like there was a dark cloud hovering over me. And so I decided before I tried to do any work, I would take a walk in a beautiful place. And usually that raises my spirits a lot. But this day, my steps still felt heavy. And so I sat down at a bench in front of a beautiful pond, put my mask on, and decided to do some focusing. I began by noticing what I felt in my body, and I noticed a heaviness that was there. And when I asked what made for that heaviness, I realized that a big part of it was that I felt really disappointed that a close colleague of mine hadn't invited me to present at a conference he was convening. And as I sat with that disappointment for a while, then the word hurt came to me. And that turned out to be the better handle. I felt hurt. There was hurt there. And that really captured it. And just saying the word hurt, kind of honoring my truth, of course, made me start to feel better. And I sat with the hurt a little bit and I asked what it needed. And it said it needed me to comfort it. So I put my hand on my chest and I sat in a few minutes and comforting it. And I began to feel even better, lighter. But I realized I was holding on to the hurt. And so in a focusing move, a prompt, I asked myself, is there anything I can do that would let me let go or not hold so tightly to the hurt, maybe to let go of it or to let it move on? And then I had this image that I was holding a cup with the hurt up to the brim. And if I could pour that cup into the pond I was sitting in front of, it might disperse. And so I did that action. I literally feel the hurt disperse in the pond, and I could feel it disperse in myself as well. Right? It began to disintegrate. And then I started really feeling not just okay, I felt really good. I knew I could talk to this colleague about the issue, but I also realized I didn't have to, that I knew in that moment I had a bigger perspective. And I knew that he liked and respected me enormously. And there was probably something that had nothing to do with me that made for that decision. You know, other people he was working with on the conference. So I sat for a minute thinking about my relationship to this colleague, and I felt some gratefulness come into my heart. He and I have had a long and creative relationship together. And then I began to think about all the other people in my life whom I love and whom I cherish, friends and colleagues and family members. And I sat for probably 10 or 15 minutes, imagining each person to come forward. I could see their face. I could feel the relationship, the quality of the relationship. And then I just kind of got a felt sense of what the qualities were that each of those people give to me. And so for one person, it was her depth and her wisdom. For another person, it was her warmth and her acceptance. For a third person, it was his sense of fun and playfulness and adventure. For another friend, it was her deep sense of loyalty and devotion. And so I had a group of like 10 or 12 circle of close people whom I loved and cherished around me. And I realized afterwards I was dosing myself with happiness as I did that. I was just appreciating these people in my life. And as I sat with that and asked myself, what was so meaningful about that for me? And I waited, and what came was that I so often take these people for granted, take all the wonderful relationships I have in my life for granted. And today I was really giving them their true importance in my life and how much well-being they gave me. And I can still feel that today, right? So by savoring it, by staying with it, it went into long-term memory. I can feel it now. Usually, if we don't savor our positive experiences, they disappear. They don't go into long-term memory. So savoring is a really important aspect of positive psychology. I shared this example to show that we can use small steps to get a sense of equanimity or, by the way, I love this phrase, equanimity is walking evenly on uneven ground. We can take small steps to get to equanimity or to get to a feeling okay, and then it's much easier to open ourselves up to gratefulness and to meaning and to happiness. So we are complicated creatures, and we've inherited a built-in proclivity to negative events. We're wired to be anxious and vigilant and worried. That's just our inheritance. And focusing is the best practice I know to move us towards a state of betterment. But in these extraordinary, unpredictable, and anxiety-provoking times, we may need to bring the same reverent attention that we bring to our troubles to bring to the positive aspects of our lives. I think we all have the capacity within us to either maximize or minimize how much we enjoy our lives and the blessings that are in them. But we have to choose to embrace the light. Okay, so we're going to begin, and I'm going to take you through a kind of a shortened version of clearing the space, and then we're going to do a little bit of a gratitude practice, okay? So when you're ready, you might allow your eyes to close if you're comfortable, to get comfortable in your chair. And let's begin by taking a few slow, deep breaths. And then allow your attention to gently rest in the center of your body. And let's begin by remembering a time or place in which you felt a sense of well-being and peacefulness. And if you can't remember such a time, you can imagine one. And allow yourself to get there with all your senses. What does it look like? What does it smell like? Anything you can see? What does it feel like to be you in this space? And now I invite you to see if there's anything between you right now and that sense of well-being you've just recalled. Or you could ask yourself, what's in the way of feeling fine just now, this morning? And you're checking inside to see if you're feeling whole and free. And if not, what might be in the way? And just let what comes in your body do the answering. You might wait for a felt sense of the first concern that comes to form. Of course, if today you happen to be feeling good, just keep your attention on the sense of feeling whole or free or peaceful. But often there's something in the way of feeling fine. And if there is, see if there's a word or phrase or image that captures that first concern that came in your body. And say the word or phrase or image back to yourself and check to see if it fits the sense you have there. Is that right? And be willing to change it if it isn't. And now you might give this concern your accepting, friendly attention for a few moments so you can acknowledge it's really there. But don't fall into it. See if you can keep it at a bit of a distance. And then I invite you to imagine you're placing this whole thing, this whole first concern outside of your body in a safe place. This is not to abandon it. It's just to give you a little space, a little respite from this issue. And sometimes it helps to imagine wrapping it as a package and seeing where it wants to go. And as you bring your attention back into your body, notice if you feel a little lighter or a little clearer inside. And now you might ask, except for that, am I feeling fine? And again, wait and see if something wants your attention next. And if second concern emerges, spend a little time with it. And then again, get a whiff of it. Don't get too far into it. Just notice it's there and acknowledge it. And then see where this one might want to go. You might wrap it up as a package or find a place where it wants to be, just to give yourself a little breath from it. And then when you come back inside, just notice if it's a little clearer now. And maybe in the interests of time, we're going to say anything else that's left that you're holding in your body, we're just going to make into one big clump of a package and see if you can place that out as well. And now, in addition to those issues and concerns, we sometimes carry a background sense, always feeling a little pressured or heavy or hurried. And see if there's a background sense that's there for you this morning. And when you name it, take a breath, wrap it up, and see if you can place that outside of your body as well. And now I invite you to spend some time in your cleared space, or however clear you got it this morning. I just invite you to welcome this space and allow yourself to rest in it. This is a time to remember that you're not your problems, even though you have them. You're much, much larger. And you might even see if there's a word or an image that would capture what it's like to be you in the clearer space. And now I'd like you to find one person in your life that you're very grateful to have in your life. It could be a person that's alive, that's in your current life, in the pandemic. It could be someone who's passed or who's not available to you during the pandemic. But just someone who brings you comfort, someone who brings you joy, someone who you're grateful for. And if you can't think of a person and you have a pet, that's fine too. And just take some time to feel into your body. and see if there's a word or a phrase that would capture the quality of your gratefulness to this person. What is it about them that makes for this grateful feeling? And you might even place your hand on your heart if you want to just really feel the connection with them and how good it is to have this person in your life. And now, before we come back together, you might just take a moment to sense how you are now. And you might say goodbye to this person and thank them for coming to your mind. And when you're ready, gently bring yourself back into the room. So I'd like to end today with a poem by our beloved American poet, Mary Oliver. And it's called Don't Hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not meant to be a crumb. It's been a joy for me to be with you today, and I want to again thank Isabel and Melinda and Lynn for inviting me.